Hi, I'm Femi Okay, and you're in the stream. Bail or pre-trial release is an integral part of justice systems around the world. It maintains an accused person's freedom in the run-up to trial. But bail in the US is rather different. Judges often set money bonds at levels way above what people can pay. And many people have little choice but to go to private bond providers or face jail.
I'm Malika Bilal. Today we look at how the bail system in the U.S. keeps people who should be presumed innocent under lock and key. And we'll examine a social movement pushing for social justice reform. We're live on YouTube. More than 500,000 people in the U.S. are being held in pre-trial detention. That is, they've been charged but not convicted of a crime, and they're awaiting trial. Many are in jail not because they're a flight risk or pose a threat, but because they just can't afford to pay the cost of bail. Have a look.
Say you're arrested for allegedly committing a crime. One of three things will happen. You get released until your trial, you're denied bail and sit behind bars until trial, or you're offered bail, an amount of money that you have to pay to get out of jail until trial. It's like the court's insurance policy that you don't skip town. Once you show up to trial, you get that money back. Paying bail allows you to go back to your kids, your job, while awaiting trial. But what if you can't pay that bond?
It is an explicitly class and wealth-based discriminatory process for determining who gets to be free while they await trial and who is forced to remain incarcerated while they maintain their innocence.
Well, online, people are using hashtags End Cash Bail, Bail Reform, and End Money Bail to force an end to what's been called a discriminatory and even predatory system. Together, the hashtags have had well over 100,000 mentions as celebrities, politicians, lawyers, and activists use them to call for an end to the money bail system. Nalim on Twitter is blunt in her assessment of why money bail needs to go. She tweets, "Hate the system, hate the money-making scheme, hate the unchecked destructive powers of the cash bail." While Gina Spencer tweets, "This system penalizes people of color and the poor." Well, the bail system has come under scrutiny following high-profile stories of African-American men and women who died while in or following pre-trial detention. Khalif Broder was 16 when he was arrested and sent to Rikers Island Jail in New York. He spent time in solitary confinement. He committed suicide months after his release. His bail, which he and his family couldn't afford, was $3,000. Sandra Bland died while being held in a Texas jail. Her bond was set at $5,000. Painted Black tweets, "Even a few days in jail can cost someone their job, their housing, their children, or in the case of Sandra Bland, their life." Well, online campaigns have sprung up to raise money to pay bail bonds for those in pre-trial detention. In the run-up to Mother's Day last month, people raised funds for Black women under the hashtag #FreeBlackMamas. The AW party tweets, "Don't forget that End Money Bail is also a woman's issue. Women are the fastest growing correctional population in the country, and nearly 80% of women in jail are mothers." This year, the Free Black Mamas campaign bailed out more than 147 women. Now people are using Free Black Fathers to do the same in time for Father's Day. And this month, Believers Bailout is raising funds through Ramadan to bail out Muslims who are in pre-trial detention, a campaign pitched to us by Stream community member Maitha El Hassan. The group says it's an opportunity to learn about the injustices of money bail. So today, we'll talk more about U.S. bail reform and want you to weigh in. Tweet us at AJStream. Ami?
Thanks so much, Malika. So for more on this, we're joined by Cherise Fano-Burden. She is CEO of the Pretrial Justice Institute. Jeff Clayton is Executive Director at the American Bail Coalition, which advocates for the bail bond industry. From Chicago, we have Suad Abdul-Kabir. She is Senior Editor of Sapelo Square. That's a website dedicated to the Black U.S. Muslim experience. And she's involved in Believers Bailout. That's a program which is raising funds throughout Ramadan to pay the bail bonds of individuals held in jail. And from New Orleans, we have Flozell Daniels Jr. He is CEO and President of Foundation for Louisiana. That's a community engagement organization. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining the stream. Jeff, did you notice as in our introduction, we didn't mention anything positive about money bail?
Well, that's really no surprise. I mean, we're under attack right now, so obviously I'm not too worried about it because I know the truth, which is that bail is a core associational and constitutional right. The bailout of various communities is important because people can get together and challenge overreaches by the government, and that's why the bail system is important. One of the things we're seeing right now is that a system of preventative detention, giving the government to lock people up without the ability to challenge it with bail, whether it's from a commercial bondsman or somebody else, will result in increases in incarceration. We're starting to see that.
So this is what I brought up from your Twitter feed. Bail works, lowest failure to appear rate, lowest crime rate, more accountability, no taxpayer funding. That's quite a list of pluses, Cherise, for saying that cash bail is really important. How do you respond to that?
So I usually talk about bail being broken in two fundamental ways. One got highlighted at the top of the show, which is that we have a lot of people in this country who cannot afford to post the money bond and get out of jail. And actually in the US, the money bond that is paid to get out of jail to bail bondsmen, it isn't returned even if you do show up for court. It's a premium that goes to the bondsman. But the system is broken actually at the other end as well, which is that people who should be detained, and there's really a small percentage of those folks, they're often able to use the same money bond system to get released pending trial without any court-ordered supervision. So we're really trying to ensure victim safety, community safety, public safety. I would also suggest that there actually is a cost to the taxpayer for the current system. We have, as you said, 500,000 people sleeping in jail tonight in a pretrial detention status. And for the most part, they have been released by courts. They're just too poor to post that bond. So we're sort of subsidizing the bail bonding industry by taking care of people in jail who, if they had not had a money bond set, would be home with their families.
So I hear you, Flozell, going, What's behind that? Speak up.
Well, I think that was, thank you, that I was just agreeing with Cherise's assertion and also thinking about a recent analysis we did here in New Orleans as we celebrated our 300th year. We wanted to look at the historical ramifications and really found through accurate historical telling that everything Cherise said is true and is tied to our extraordinary history in this country of enslavement of people of African descent and racialized bias and behavior. There's a real connection between these practices, these policies, who gets enriched by them, and how we still practice them. And they often have very little to do with accountability or safety.
I hear what you're saying there, Flozell. I want to bring up the perspective of someone on Twitter. We actually heard from several employers and employees of the bail bondsman industry. This is Kyle, and I'll direct this to you, Jeff. Kyle says, blaming the bail bondsman is like blaming the mailman for delivering bills you don't like. Cash bail is used by 99% of judges because it works.
Yeah, I think the 99% number is probably a little inaccurate. I mean, if you look at the stats, I mean, in felony cases, release on bail is only about 30 to 35% of the cases. So it's not even the most common form of release in the United States of America. Do judges think it worked? In some cases, yes, they do. Are judges the gatekeeper on this system, and our national policy that makers the gatekeeper on the system? The answer is yes. We're not. We don't set bails. All we do is post them and help people get out of jail. So that part of it, I think, is a little inaccurate.
So, Ed, I'm just trying to give our international audience a sense of the kind of impact that either having to meet a cash bail or failing to meet a cash bail actually has on communities who are either impoverished or communities of color. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I found, and so, getting involved with Believers Bailout for me was really once I discovered that this was happening, right? And many people talk about it like this injustice in plain sight. And so you have people, for example, there was a woman in Chicago who was in jail for sort of 14 months, right? Just because she couldn't afford to pay the bond. There's another young man in Chicago who's been in jail since 2016, just because they can't afford to pay the bond. The woman lost her business. She almost lost her child. We have people who are losing jobs, they lose family members, people who have mental health issues or health issues that aren't being addressed. And so this idea that only reason you're in jail is because you can't pay really is about you being penalized, right? Because you're poor. And when I heard that, and when I sort of discovered, initially I heard about the Mama's Day bailout you mentioned, and that really got me thinking about, what is going on in these jails, and what can we do to change it? And, the Mama's Day bill really resonated with me as a Black person, right? This idea that we're going to free ourselves, that we're not going to wait, we're going to interrupt the system in the ways that we can. The long-term, game is to end money bail, but until then, we're going to free ourselves. And so Believers Bailout came out of that same impetus, right? That, it's also a tradition of Muslims freeing each other. And it's Ramadan, and it's a time where people, you know, want to give and want to help each other. And so it just seemed like the perfect time and the perfect opportunity to really sort of get involved and really raise the consciousness. Because I think one of the big things about this bail system is that you really have to shift perspectives, right? People have to recognize that jail and prison actually doesn't work. This question of being effective, I mean, for what I've read, I know in DC, like Washington, DC, they don't use money bail. And 88% or somewhere around there of the people who actually, you know, get released, come back, that they're arrest free, you know. So this idea of bail being effective, you know, to me seems a bit of a fallacy. And what's really effective, I think, is sort of helping communities with what their needs are, you know, helping communities, putting the energy and money that we might give to jail to communities.
Two quick points I think I would make on that would be that you can't blame the bail industry for the problems in Illinois because we don't operate in the state of Illinois. So it's not our fault of what's going on in Chicago. We have nothing to do with that. But what I would say is that Washington, D.C. Is a potential alternative, and really it's a cost for policymakers. You're looking at $65 to $70 million in costs, probably would be inflated if we were to apply it to other jurisdictions. But there's a taxpayer cost to implement that system, and you're also opening the door to detention without bail, which we've seen abuses, not necessarily
So I'm
in
just going to slow you down a little bit for our international audience, and actually for some of our American audience. In Washington, D.C. and New Jersey, two states that do not have cash bail.
That's right, and I'd say New Jersey, the latest numbers, almost 1 out of 2 people are having the prosecutor file a motion to detain them without bail. So exactly what they're doing in Chicago, they can't bail those people out because they're locked up without bail.
Sharice is biting her tongue, but not for long.
Not for long. Well, Jeff and I are both actually committed to accountability and data with government. And so I think we ought to just sort of tell the truth about what's happening. As Sawad said, most of the people in DC go home. They go home pending trial. They go home under some conditions of release. DC is unique because they have in-house services that make that system more expensive, but in other places where there are county-run behavioral health services, it's not as expensive.
And we have to say the reason DC and New Jersey did this was because they felt that there were injustices happening to poor people, people of color.
Oh, absolutely.
People just couldn't afford to pay.
That's right. If the New Jersey bail system had been working before, they would have left everything the way that it was. But now we have 94% of people going home pending trial. Our goal really as an organization is get down to below 10% pretrial incarceration, and New Jersey and DC are two places that have done that.
Well, somebody needs to call the New Jersey weed man and ask him how it went for him, because he's a small-time drug dealer that spent 14 months in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
Yeah.
So this isn't the weed man that you talk about, but this is someone who spent time. This is someone who spent time in New Jersey, in the New Jersey correctional system. 617 just chatted to us on YouTube Live, says, I believe my experience was fair. Bail in New Jersey is based on a number system, based on prior convictions, part skipped court appearances, your charges, and history with the court. So that's one example in which some might say they're doing it right. But I want to share with you another example. And this, Flozell, I'll give to you. This is a video comment from a woman in Chicago named Levette Mays. Have a listen to what she told the stream.
In 2015, I was arrested for an altercation, which led to a judge to assess my bail at $250,000, $25,000 to walk. I could not afford it. I spent 571 days in Cook County Jail. This caused me to nearly lose my children. I lost my home. I lost my business. It hurt my family. I ended up taking a plea deal, not because I didn't think I could beat the case, but because my family had been through enough.
So Flozell, she took a plea deal, even though she thought she could have beat the case. Is that something you see often?
I think it is something we see often, and we hear people, particularly lawyers, civil rights lawyers here in New Orleans and across Louisiana who are looking at these issues with us. Part of the unspoken story, and I'm really glad Ms. Mays brought this up, is that prosecutors often want the person they're charging to be incarcerated so they can force the plea. Right, 97% of cases in Louisiana end with plea deals because the system wants to, as efficiently as possible, prosecute and incarcerate as many people as possible. And so, we get right back to this issue. The other thing that Ms. Mays brought up is that we have a number of people in jail who are not there for the reasons that the normal person would think. We think, very violent people are the ones who should be in jail. The truth is, if we looked in New Orleans today, nearly half the people in the local jail would not be there but for the case that they can't pay. And so again, bail doesn't work. Money bail is not working because it's tied to whether people have resources, not to whether they are dangerous or whether they'll return to court.
Guess I just want to show our audience what the high price of US bail actually means. I want to share some figures with you. So the average mean income of somebody who's being asked for a bail payment is about $15,000. That's average. Some people have a whole lot less. The average bail bond that you're being asked to pay, $10,000, okay? So that's your income, that's the bail bond. And then a typical bond provider fee. So then you say, okay, we can't pay this, but we're going to go to somebody who can help us pay it. They will ask, typically, at least for $1,000, maybe more, but about 10 or 15% of your overall bail price. And then this is the realistic viewpoint of how much cash do Americans have? And so 44% of people who are asking for a bail bond, they can't even come up with $400 in an emergency. So this is the problem. Jeff, do you see that?
I do see that.
Because these are official stats.
Sure,
we didn't make them up. We're not massaging them.
Oh, no.
That's almost impossible. So if you're poor, you're going to jail even before your trial.
I think your numbers are probably low. There's probably more people who can't afford it. But the reality is that bail is a third-party provided benefit at no cost to the state. Usually it's a third party. It's not the defendant self-bailing. And so
excuse me, can I just ask you then, so you're talking about the cost to the state, but what about the cost to the community, the cost to families and kids and to employers? I understand what you're saying in terms of this doesn't cost the state much. Anything.
Sure. No,
but what about the human cost?
I think the entire criminal justice system has a disparate impact. We've seen that. I don't think bail is unique or non-unique as a result of that. I'm not sure it exacerbates the problem any worse than it already is. And I agree that the criminal justice system is dysfunctional right now, and changes need to be made to it. But I don't think this issue is the main driver of all the disparities and all the issues in the system.
But I would say, and I'm not the expert here. I'm just a community member trying to help other people. But from what I've read, people who are on bonds actually are more likely to sort of like take a plea. They're also more likely to get longer sentences. Like all these things happen because it's hard to defend yourself when you're in jail. And so, it's about this being set up in the first place, right? That people are not able to they're not able to sort of help themselves, right? And so I don't think we can say that it doesn't actually have an effect. I think bail has a clear effect on people's outcomes. And so this is why we need to end it, right? Because there's no reason for this, right? In Chicago, 70% of the people, right, who are in Cook County Jail are nonviolent offenders, right? So this idea of safety is not the case here, right? And so there's a lot of efforts. We partner with the Chicago Community Bond Fund to sort of provide resources and to challenge this legislatively, because we know it's not working and that the cost is just way too high. The cost to people, again, jobs, families, lives are being lost. And so we really have to sort of intervene. So this idea that bail itself is not really the problem, I think is really wrong.
So I hear you there. I want to bring this in from Twitter. This is a Truth Seeker who says, the people benefiting from the bail system don't want to see that go away. It brings a whole lot of money. It's unfair that because someone who has a rich family can get out of jail, others that can't afford it have to stay. The bail system should be abolished ASAP. But Charisse, I want to bring the other side of that conversation, because we also got this on Twitter. This is Rebecca, who says, this focus on the inability to pay is false and misleading. Most bail agents offer affordable payment plans and are good and honest. I own an agency and offer 0% down, low monthly payment, no interest. Throwing the entire bail industry out is the wrong path towards improvement. That last part of her statement, throwing the entire bail industry out. What are your thoughts on that? How do you reform this?
Yeah, so I'll tie that statement to something Sawad said as well, which is I think that bail reform is one piece of overall criminal justice reform that has to happen. And if you look at a place like New Jersey, the success we've seen in New Jersey of reducing the number of people who are in jail pre-trial is not just a function of doing something better once they got booked in. They've actually reduced the number of arrests and bookings into the jail in all across New Jersey. So you have about 140,000 people last year who did not actually have to get checked into the jail or booked into the jail and go through an assessment and be potentially up for pretrial detention. So this is part of an overall reform, including assigning people counsel so that they go to these hearings represented by counsel and can maybe avoid some of the issues Sawad mentioned about people getting worse outcomes as a result of being detained pending trial. I think the main point is this. The country's worried about public safety. And money bail has no impact on public safety. And so what we're really talking about in communities is, can we help the system identify those maybe 8 or 10 people out of 100 that should go to a detention hearing and let the court decide based on evidence whether or not they should be detained. And everybody else should go home with court reminders or supports in the community and be able to participate in their own defense and potentially work through their cases that way. So, you know, we're not trying to throw out bail. Bail is the contract between the court and the defendant. We're actually suggesting that we should be evolving past money bond.
I want to show you some of the campaigning audience watching this discussion right now to actually reform the bail system. So there's Believers Bailout. Suad's been telling us about this. National Bailout campaign. Also, something that Sharice has been talking about, Pretrial Justice Institute. So there's a lot of reform or pushing for reform. Let me show you what that reform actually looks like. So on the 11th of May, Colour of Change, an organisation, and several of their partner organisations actually paid the bail for 59 mothers. Here's one of the mums. Have a look. Flozell, paying bail for people who can't afford to pay bail, is that on the path to reform? What do we need to do? Something better, something bigger?
Well, I think it absolutely is on the path to reform. And what it does is it reminds the public that the storyline, the narrative that we've heard for years now is actually not true. We've heard repeatedly, even on this conversation, that, you know, this is about accountability, this is about fairness. Actually, our ability to end money bail and to make the kind of reforms that have been mentioned by Suad and Sharice really get us to where we should be. I come from a community that has had its fair share of safety challenges. This system actually doesn't allow us to create the kind of safety that we want. I think seeing these examples of what liberating people looks like, of what democratizing this system looks like, is a reminder for the general public, and especially for affected communities, that we should be moving in the right direction, and doing so means that we would end money bail.
And if I could just add one thing to what he said, and I agree completely, is also we have to remind ourselves this is not normal, right? The United States incarcerates more people, like 25% of the world's population. 500,000 people, the majority of them are in jail because they can't afford to pay bail. Like, that's not normal. And it doesn't have to be this way. Most developed nations don't have money bond, right? So, like, it does not have to be this way. So I think that's also really important to keep track of, that, you know, there are other ways to resolve issues, social issues that we have that, you know, that we're worried about. There are other ways to deal with safety, you know, primarily with increasing support to communities, improving our schools, you know, and more job opportunities, better health care. I mean, this is what we need. We don't need bail.
That's right. You know, the video is showing OPP right here in New Orleans. Part of what we learned in our analysis is that we spend as much or more money going after people for bail than we do than we get in return. And so it's just a nonsensical system at every level.
And Sharice, I know you want to get in here. I just want to read this tweet that would agree with you. Suad, Agitator-in-Chief is their handle. Paying bail for people that can't afford it is a great way to show solidarity with people incarcerated pre-trial, but it is only a Band-Aid of a much larger problem. Sharice, I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so I was just going to contextualize that. I mean, I love Mama's Bailout. I love Father's Day Bailout. I love all of these, and thank you so much for what you're doing in Cook County, Suad. But on Mother's Day, when we were able to bond out 149 women, we incarcerated 30,000 people that day. So the scope of the problem is immense. And these are great ways to call attention to the need for systemic reform.
Sure. And early on I misspoke. I was talking about New Jersey and DC as being states who'd actually got rid of cash bail. And I live in DC, so I should know that DC is not a state, it is a district. But I'm sure you understood what I was going for. Okay, Jeff and Sharice and Suad and Flozell, thank you for being part of this discussion. It will be ongoing because cash bail isn't going anywhere quite yet. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. And we will continue it always online using hashtag HAStream or @HAStream on Twitter. See you soon.